That's how it is at every one of these. I turn off the music and everybody gets quiet. Welcome to Tackle with TAC4. I am Alan Claypool, president of TAC4 Solutions. So I want to tell you a little bit about our event and how this gets started. We are TAC4 Solutions. We are a consulting firm that helps instill organizational health in companies. We also manage complex projects and help redesign processes. And in all of the things we do, we use what we call the 9 ground rules for cohesive team behavior. These are business rules on how to behave well in business. And we've got a couple of clients here even tonight that have gone through our program and have seen dramatic differences in the way they behave in a business environment. So for instance, people in business tend to think, I'm right and you're wrong and you're the one causing my problem, and we come and help them work together to learn how to see things differently and how to behave better together. We started teaching seminars on these ground rules that we have because they are so transformative in business processes. And at one of our seminars, somebody raised their hand and said, how do you apply these ground rules to politics? And I laughed and I said, I don't. You've just found the one place in my life where I complain and I blame people like crazy. I assume bad motives of everyone on the other side of the fence from where I am. And that challenged me. Why do I have an outlier in my life where I teach these ground rules and yet not in one area of my life? And so I changed. I started behaving differently. Some would say most of the time, not all the time. But in politics, where it's hardest for me at least, I now much better live by the ground rules as I'm having discussions. And that then led to this event of trying to get other people to come together to debate and to debate very difficult political issues and to see how we can get new solutions when we actually listen to the other side. So what I want to do tonight is talk through the ground rules, because really the ground rules are the star of the show tonight. We've got 2 fantastic panelists that we're very honored to have. The ground rules are the star of the show because what we're really wanting is for the panelists to understand how these ground rules can get us to new solutions when we start listening to the other side. And we want you all, the audience, to start seeing how to go to your dining room discussions differently than you currently do. Literally, for you to be in a political discussion and you'll say a comment and I'll want you to remember these ground rules and say, wait a minute, that violates ground rule 3. My comment that I just made violates ground rule 3. So that is really what we're trying to do, is get new discussions going that can get to better solutions. So let me tell you just a little bit about what we're trying to do. This is the normal political environment that we live in, people yelling at each other saying, I'm right, you're wrong, you're just not listening to my points, which is true. No one's listening to each other's points. And so what we've done here with Tackle instead is try to get a new set of goals where we've got a venue for rational, respectful political discourse where we're actually hearing the other side. We want to teach you all and the panelists how to live by these ground rules, how to, not just for the sake of the ground rules, but so that we solve our solutions. These are very difficult solutions. I don't know, anybody hear us on Mandy Connell last week? And we were talking on Mandy, and she said, Alan, what you're trying to get me to do is really difficult. It makes me be a better person if I'm going to have to live this way. And she said, it's like you wanting us to be the very best of ourselves. And I said, don't you think these incredibly difficult problems, our hardest problems, are going to require us to be our best self? Do we really believe that we can solve these incredibly difficult problems with our lowest base character? It's going to require us to be better people, to listen to each other, to be more intelligent, to be more considerate, to hear the other side, and to come up with more inventive solutions. I often have solutions, and I think that my solutions are the way to fix the problem. And then I go talk to somebody on the other side, and I hear, finally listening to them, I hear how my solution is not meeting some of their needs. How should I then adjust my solution to meet their needs better? And that's really what we're trying to accomplish here. To penetrate the average citizen with strong ideas instead of heated sound bites, create new solutions, and also to provide financial benefit to charities. And so we do have 2 charities here tonight, which we'll talk to. Each panelist has brought a charity, and we will allocate the funds to the charities according to how well the panelists have lived by the ground rules. We'll explain the voting in just a minute. So here's our sponsors for the evening. We are TAC4 Solutions. We host the debate. People Strategy Consulting is Deanna Philpott here as one of our judges, and they have a table in the back with there are people back there, Rudy and Margie. Thank you very much for coming. And Deanna has been a central part of this entire Tackle event. She's helped us found the event last year as well as being here as a judge tonight. Creative Workshop is the place you are in. Has anybody not been to Creative Workshop before? It is a fantastic place. You're welcome to walk around and see the place. It's a creative meeting space for strategic planning or any other sort of business type environment where you want to come and have a more inventive dialogue than you normally do. We come here as often as we can. Creative Workshop. CASA is one of the charity panelists back at the table that I believe Keith has brought CASA to the table tonight. Franklin County Humane Society back on my back left, brought by Charles. And so thank you all for coming tonight. And so the funds, all of your the proceeds from tonight will go to these two charities allocated based on how well the panelists live by the ground rules. MoveOn.org, where Keith Rouda is a member and lead regional director for Kentucky, and Kentucky Concealed Carry Coalition, where Charles Riggs is on the board. Okay, so those are our sponsors for the evening. This is how the evening will run. Ground rule explanation is what we're about to get into. Then we'll have panel discussion with the rules. So each panelist will give a 10-minute monologue. Then the judges will come up for 5 minutes and instruct the panelists on how to better live by the ground rules. Because really what we're trying to do tonight is show all of us how to have better discussion according to the ground rules so that we get to better solutions. So the judges will come up and talk through their insights in the ground rules about the monologues. Then the panelists will have an open 30-minute free-for-all just among themselves. They will be talking among themselves, challenging each other's premises. I will be challenging them as to how they are living by the ground rules. If I hear someone violating one of the ground rules, I'll actually speak up and say, now how could you word that differently according to the ground rules? That'll go on for 20 minutes. Then we have 20 minutes of audience participation, 3 minutes per person in the audience that would like to speak. You come up to the microphone. You can either ask the panelists a question or just make a comment for 3 minutes. And we want you all living by the ground rules as well in your comments and questions. And where you don't, then I'll also chime in and advise you on how to live by the ground rules better during your discussion as well. Throughout this, does everybody have a ballot for voting? Okay, so the voting, you will be voting on who had the best argument and who lived by the ground rules the best. So just circle those two at the end of the debate, and we'll have somebody pick it up and count. And by the end of the debate, we'll announce the allocation of the charities. And then action steps is our final. We like for the panelists to give as much action-oriented solutions in order to accomplish the tasks, and we ask you all to live by these action steps and go out and make it happen. Okay, so let's go over the ground rules very quickly. Donna, how are we doing on time? Donna is our timekeeper in the back, Donna Grant with Tag 4 Solutions, and when she speaks, we will all adhere to her time, and I'm the one who has the worst problem with it. Fantastic, we're in great shape. So that's 1 minute per ground rule, because we have the 7 ground rules for political discourse. So show respect, assuming good motives. So this means to each other, the panelists we ask to show respect to each other. It also means to the people on the other side of the aisle in general who aren't here tonight, but generally who hold those opinions. Be respectful toward those other people. Assume good motives from those other people, which is a very difficult thing to do when I'm deeply entrenched in my thoughts. Do I actually believe that they're trying to make the world a better place or not? Because they are. It aligns us with truth when we believe that the other side is assuming good motives and wanting to make is having good motives and wanting to make the world a better place. Are they having good motives in every single behavior that they have? Not necessarily, but overall, they do have good motives in wanting to make the world a better place. So we ask that for the panelists to show during their monologues, during their open discussion, that they are assuming good motives from each other. Do not complain without offering solutions with realistic action steps. The thing that we are complaining about, and this is true not just in politics, but in all of life, every time I complain, I'm actually like pouring cement from that problem actually getting fixed. If I can instead, whenever I complain about anything, if I can say, what can I do about that? What else can I do about that thing that I'm complaining about? Then there's actually a chance that that complaint's going to get fixed, as opposed to if I'm just complaining, I'm not contributing at all. In fact, I'm tearing down and keeping us from being able to solve our problems. So be a part of the solution. Blame the process, not the person. It's so easy in our discussion to believe that you're causing our problems. Whoever you are, you're the cause of my problems. What we ask you to do instead is to believe that you don't have absolute truth. Is there absolute truth? I believe yes. And it's the same for all, but I don't embody it. I don't know absolute truth, all of it. I don't. I know pieces of it, and so question my own virtue, lower my own ability of me being the person that's right, and instead consider what the other person is saying. Listen to the needs and constraints on the other side and say, tell me why you believe what you believe. Let that inform my decision. If I am listening to you on the other side, then I've got a better chance of meeting all of our needs and not just my little piece of the world that I care about. So blame the process, not the person. That person's not wrong. We're actually seeking for truth here. Okay. Fourth, clarify opinion from fact. In politics, it is very, very common for politicians to say, this is true, when really that's not absolute fact. They are saying it as fact when really it's their opinion or it's based in their worldview. Same thing with surveys or studies. People state the results of a survey as though it is a fact. Most all surveys, in fact, all surveys and most all studies, maybe they have some statistics in it, but then it's statistics on top of my worldview become the results of the study. My worldview is my opinion. And so just clarify that. It's okay that you've got an opinion. It's okay that you believe one survey over another, one study over another. But clarify that I am quoting this statistic. I am quoting this survey because it also aligns with my worldview. It is my opinion. It is not fact. Okay? So just that clarification goes a long way to us actually being able to hear each other and get to a better solution. Ground rule number 5, seek the truth over political positioning. We are actually trying to solve problems and get to the real truth. What's really going to solve the problem? Not just what's going to get my way, not just what's going to advocate for my side, but what is really going to solve the problem, and that's what we're trying to get to. Okay? Real solutions, real truth. 6, this is politics. And politics really is hard for various reasons, and this is one of the big reasons, is because we do have core moral, philosophical differences. And so we don't usually get down to those, because usually we stay up in the accusation world, in the soundbite world. What we're trying to do here is ask more questions. Tell me why you believe that. Tell me why you believe that. Why do you disagree with him? And tell me more. Why do you disagree? Let's get down to the core moral, philosophical difference. And when we do get to the core difference, clarify that difference, make clear why it is you believe what you believe, and that's different from the other person, no accusations, and move on with your various solutions. But at least you got down to what that core difference is, which we hardly ever get to do in political discussions, except for here. Tackle with Tack 4. And finally, ground rule number 7 is hold yourself and others accountable to words and commitments with consequences. So this is the only ground rule that the judges will not be judging on, because this is more an ongoing activity. But we do ask you to hold yourself, first of all, accountable to living by these ground rules in your discussions. If you're seeing bad behavior from other people during your political discussions, is it because you're also exhibiting bad behavior toward them? Are you also accusing them of things? Are you also not really listening to their points? And so listen to that and hold yourself accountable to living this way, and then hold other people accountable to what they say and do. Okay, so I'm seeing that I've only got 1 more minute left, which means I've got to hurry through this. So let's announce our judges for the evening. We have Kristen Riddick from Riddick Enterprises. She's also on WNDA 1570 AM every morning, 5 days a week. Real Life in Louisville. Do you want to stand up, Kristen? Thank you very much for being here. Then we have Mike Spence, Vice President. I don't even know your title. Vice President of... We'll do that. Operations is what it is. It's really like 7 things that he's kind of vice president of. Mike Spence, Vice President of Operations of Kaizen Technologies. And Deanna Philpott, President of People Strategy Consulting, who we've already mentioned has been an integral part to what we do here at Tackle. So thanks to the judges. You all will have a moment on the stage later. We've already talked through how the evening's going to go, so this is how the voting goes. The judges are going to have 1 point apiece for each of the first 6 ground rules. They decide who is living by the ground rule the best for each of those 6 ground rules. And then the audience has 4 points, 1 based on who gave the best argument, and 3 points to who you all believe lived by the ground rules best, allocated based on the percentage that you all gave to the panelists. So that's how we vote, and we'll know by the end of the evening how we're going to allocate the funds to the charities. Questions? Hope not, because I'm out of time. Okay, so it's time to introduce our panelists. We have Keith Rouda, who's going to go first. He is the regional organizer for KentuckyMoveOn.org. And we have Charles Riggs, the director of Kentucky Concealed Carry Coalition, KC3. Woohoo! Panelists fighting it out. Respectfully fighting it out. Okay, so I think we did a coin toss, and Keith is going to go first on the coin toss. What's that, Charles?
Let me get this straight. You said no headbutting, no eye gouging.
That is correct. Well, unless you want to lose points for respect, but you can ask. Okay, so thank you to the panelists. Y'all will take over. And our topic for the evening is does gun control reduce violence? And we will have the ground rules up for most of the evening, but I believe, Keith, you have a PowerPoint for us to start with. So
I do.
We'll get that started right.
Hello, thanks for coming. So 1 month ago yesterday, Wayne LaPierre, the president of the National Rifle Association, addressed the nation in response to the mass shooting of children and their teachers in Newtown, Connecticut. In his address, he laid some of the blame on violent video games, violent TV shows and movies, and deficit-driven budget cuts. He laid some of the blame on the fact that we don't have a database of every mentally ill person in the country, and he laid some of the blame on the fact that we actually don't have a very good database of all of the killers, robbers, rapists, and gang members in the country. He famously proposed, not for the first time, that the nation embark on a program to make sure that all 130,000 schools in the United States be protected by armed guards. His speech focused exclusively on how to protect our children, probably because at the time, that's what was on everybody's mind. But now that the debate on what to do about gun violence has started in earnest, we need to recognize that dealing with the problem of mass shootings in schools won't solve the problem of mass shootings in movie theaters, shopping malls, parking lots, grocery stores, fast food restaurants, college campuses, churches, or in office buildings, all of which have seen mass shootings in recent years. And we need to recognize that if we did somehow solve the problem of mass shootings, that mass shootings only account for a small percentage of gun deaths in the country. Bureau of Justice Statistics data shows that every year for 40 years, the problem of mass shootings, every year for 40 years, there have been more than 10,000 gun homicides in the country, and sometimes a lot more every year. In my lifetime, nearly 500,000 Americans have been killed by guns through murder. Gunpolicy.org puts total gun deaths, including suicides in the United States, at over 300,000 in just the last 10 years alone. Over 40 years, nearly 1.5 million Americans have died from gunshots. Men, women, children, babies, blacks, whites, Asians, Indians, rich people, poor people, city people, rural people, liberals, conservatives, many of them gun owners. 1.5 million dead Americans. As we were preparing for this debate, Alan, our esteemed moderator, asked us to focus on what both sides' needs are. I can tell you what my side's need is. We need this carnage to stop. We need it to stop entirely, and we need it to stop right now. That said, I want to be clear that I recognize that our need to end the carnage is not the only need that we're going to have to address when we're talking about gun violence. This may come as a surprise to some, but I recognize that in this country we have a right to keep and bear arms. I recognize that in 2008, Justice Scalia, writing for the majority opinion of the Supreme Court in the District of Columbia v. Heller, in one of his more activist moments, I will say, identified a right to keep and bear guns individually, and that he specifically eliminated any possible requirement that one belong to a well-regulated militia in order to do so. Furthermore, he specifically identified the purpose of repelling an overbearing federal government as a legitimate use, if not the legitimate use, for that right. I disagree with the Supreme Court's decision in Heller, and I disagree with some aspects of Justice Scalia's opinion that forms the basis for that decision. But I do not disagree that the case came before the Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court had the authority to make the decision, and that the Supreme Court, that unless the Supreme Court overturns itself or the Constitution is amended, that Heller is the law of this land. That's what we have to live by. What I would ask of gun rights advocates is that they recognize that in finding this right, the Supreme Court, in none other than Justice Scalia's own hand, also specifically stated the following. Like most rights, the right secured by the Second Amendment is not unlimited. Scalia explains that the Second Amendment right was not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever, in any manner whatsoever, and for whatever purpose. He specifically states that, quote, prohibitions on carrying concealed weapons were lawful under the Second Amendment. Nothing, in our opinion, he says, should be taken to cast doubt on long-standing prohibitions on the possession of firearms by felons and the mentally ill, or on laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places such as schools and government buildings, or laws imposing conditions and qualifications on the commercial sale of arms. Just to be clear, among other things, this part of his opinion means that requiring background checks on all gun sales is not a violation of the Constitution. Scalia continued, we also recognize another important limitation on the right to keep and bear arms. He then cites a case called Miller, in which the Supreme Court left standing prohibitions on owning machine guns and sawed-off shotguns. Scalia says, we think that limitation is fairly supported by the historical tradition of prohibiting the carrying of dangerous and unusual weapons. Scalia went further, and this is critical to understanding the limitations of our Second Amendment rights. In this, he refers to the prefatory clause and the right. You'll recognize these words. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, is the prefatory clause of the Second Amendment. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed is the right. Scalia. It may be objected that if weapons are not most, it may be objected that if weapons that are most useful in military service, M16 rifles and the like, may be banned, then the Second Amendment right is completely detached from the prefatory clause. But as we have said, the conception of the militia at the time of the Second Amendment's ratification was the body of citizens capable of military service who would bring the sorts of lawful weapons that they possessed at home to militia duty. It may well be true that a militia, to be as effective as militias in the 18th century, and this is still Scalia talking, would require sophisticated arms that are highly unusual in society at large. Indeed, it may be true that no amount of small arms could be useful against modern-day bombers and tanks. But the fact that modern developments have limited the degree of fit between the prefatory clause and the protected right cannot change our interpretation of the right. So that's a little highfalutin. But let's be clear on what that means. It means you have a right to use the guns that you use for other things to defend yourself against the federal government if you need to do so. But you do not have a constitutional right to own any kind of weapon that might be required in order for that fight to be successful. You may want that right. You are certainly welcome to try to amend the Constitution in order to get it, but as the Constitution is written and interpreted by the Supreme Court, you do not have that right. Why is this all important? It's important because gun control, or more properly, gun safety regulation, can mean different things to different people. When Australia banned automatic and semi-automatic rifles and shotguns, for example, the ban was backed by a mandatory buyback program. I think it wasn't rifles, I think it was all automatic weapons. The guns were totally taken out of circulation. When the results of this ban were phenomenal, the firearm homicide rate fell by 59%, That is not what is on the table in the United States. What is on the table is a specific set of proposals that President Obama and Vice President Biden have laid out. In this country, at this time, these proposals are what gun control looks like. I'm well aware that in some circles there are concerns that I consider fantastical about everything from jackbooted tyrants or thugs coming to confiscate everyone's guns to President Obama becoming a tyrant and taking on the power of kings. There's nothing to be gained from having a debate over fantasy, though. As a friend of mine has suggested, if you are going to argue a fantasy world in which King Obama is coming for your guns, then you have to allow me to argue that it isn't a problem. I'll simply stop him with my lightsaber. The proposal on the table in this country at this time is complex, as Wayne LaPierre and others have suggested that any solution to the carnage would have to be. It's actually a set of 30 smaller proposals. One of those proposals is to reinstate and rework the assault weapons ban that was the law of the land from 1994 to 2004. For the reasons that Justice Scalia articulated, this would clearly not violate the Second Amendment. It would be controversial. We should certainly discuss it. We should talk about it on its merits, but it would not be unconstitutional. Reinstating and reworking the assault weapons ban would require action by Congress, and so far from assuming the power of kings, President Obama has done what is unquestionably within his power to do. He has politely asked Congress to pass a law. Some of the proposals are common sense ones that vast majorities of gun rights and gun control advocates support. For example, if we're going to use background checks to keep the guns out of the hands of dangerous people, the system should have the information needed to do background checks, and all legal gun sales should use it. Will there be a black market for guns? Probably. But the fact that we cannot prevent all dangerous people from obtaining guns cannot justify failing to prevent most dangerous people from obtaining guns. Some of the proposals are as benign as writing an open letter that clarifies a point of law. One of the proposals supports the NRA's position that to provide armed guards for schools if the schools want. And there are a variety of other proposals that range from letters to spoken campaigns to work done in the agencies. When Alan asked us to leave you with action items, my action item is simply this. The proposal, I have it here, it's 15 pages long, including cover. It's well written and easy to read. I would ask that you read it and that we have the debate based on actual proposals that are actually on the table, not some of the fantasies that are going to be raining down on us.
As I was approached to do this debate, as I understood it, the question was, does gun control work? Obviously, gun control does not work. Otherwise, we would not be having this debate. Otherwise, we would be assured that everything that we were doing now and everything that we had done the last 40 or 50 years had been sufficient. The fact that we still continue to have crime in this country, some of it committed with firearms, a great deal of it not, is testament to the fact that gun control has not worked. It has not stopped crime. It has not stopped criminals from obtaining guns. It has not made people happy with the rights they now possess. We have lived with 20,000 laws in this nation and an increasing number of laws that restrict firearms ownership. If gun control worked, as has famously been said, Chicago would be the safest city in the United States. It obviously is not. If gun control worked, England would be the safest country in the world, because England, in the wake of the Hungerford slaughter, outlawed the possession of handguns and put draconian limitations on the possession of long guns. What has happened in England? Criminals have sawn off the barrels of shotguns and they have attacked citizens. Self-defense has become a crime. And now the English are calling for the abolition of knife ownership or the registration of knives, and blunting the tips of the knives that you can use in your kitchen because there's knife crime. The problem is not guns. The problem is a culture that rewards and applauds violence. Gun control doesn't work. Gun control leads to confiscation. Gun control advocates have always said, of course, that will never happen in the United States. The people of Bermuda would be happy to learn that, where they were told that gun control would not lead to confiscation. Now you can't own a firearm in Bermuda. In New York City in 1991, they were told that they were going to have to register their long guns. Those being those guns, rifles and shotguns, that are generally understood to be protected under any gun control legislation because they have a sporting purpose. Subsequently, several years later, the people of New York City who owned weapons of a type that had been decided by fiat to be dangerous were ordered out of the city. They either had to be sold or transferred, moved out, but they could no longer live in New York City. So this is the problem that we have with gun control. First of all, it doesn't regulate crime. It regulates law-abiding people who choose to obey the law. Secondly, it has a long, long history of deceit. The problem, you want to sing good motives going by the rules that we have here, and that is something that is obviously difficult for those of us on the pro-gun ownership side of things to do. We will attempt to continue to concede that people believe that these things work. It is difficult to say that these things work and that we're supposed to continue to accept your belief in the face of Chicago. Where else? Mexico. Look at Mexico. The possession of a single round of ammunition by an American citizen in Mexico led to a jail sentence of several years. It has not stopped the slaughters in the streets. Gun control is supposed to protect us in a nation that is supposed to be egalitarian, where everyone is equal. Gun control has not stopped government officials in this nation from moving thousands of firearms illegally into Mexico, where guns are regulated and illegal. Gun control is something that the elite and the moneyed don't have to obey, and that is why we object. Ordinary people are always going to be affected more by the law than those people who can find a way to get around it. California has concealed carry permits, as does New York City. The people who have concealed carry permits in those places are movie stars and politicians and the moneyed individuals. Where is that in keeping with the American tradition of equality under the law and our constitutional rights? The solutions that we'd like to see have generally been reduced by the opposition to simply giving everybody a gun. No, what we'd like is for people to be honest about what they actually want to do and what they want to accomplish. All we have to do to see what works is to look at Israel. Israel is a country surrounded on all sides by people who would love nothing more than to see them squashed like a bug and washed out into the sea. They had people far more dangerous than any lunatic school shooter we've ever had to deal with in the United States every day trying to kill them, and specifically coming into their schools to kill their children. When Israel got tired not having the luxury of a huge nation of 300 million people with a vast land mass and a lot of money, but facing the fact that they had to do something right now, they armed their teachers and their principals. And the next few times that people tried to come into their schools and slaughter their innocents, they were themselves killed. Israel took a no prisoners attitude toward anybody who chose to commit murder. The Ten Commandments don't say thou shalt not kill. They use the Judaic form thou shalt not do murder. As a consequence, Israel's children are no longer being killed in their seats. I'm not advocating for everybody to be armed. I'm not advocating for an AR-15 in every sink. No, that's a chicken in every sink, isn't it? It makes the AR-15s rust in any case. I'm not advocating for one in everybody's back seat. What I am advocating for is that the people who know something about firearms, who know something about what works, be given an opportunity to make an attempt for rational responses and stop making all of this emotional responses to the subject. They dredge up, they dance in the blood of innocence, and that's not acceptable to us. It has nothing to do with what solves problems. They say seek a solution and not political positioning, and that's what those of us on the side of firearms ownership see all this as. When you can look at Israel on the one hand as a place where murder is no longer committed on their children, and England on the other hand, where now, because what they've done has not been enough, and now we have to blunt our kitchen knives, it's easy to see what works and what doesn't. So if we're looking at the proposition, does gun control work? Most emphatically, in its form, as those people who propounded in this nation have attempted to do it in the last 40 or 50 years, most emphatically, no, it does not. And it's time to stop demeaning gun owners, and it's time to seek a true and honest dialogue that doesn't demonize them a priori before the discussion even begins. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to the panelists for the monologues. It's now time for the judges to come and give some guidance as to where they lived by the ground rules well, where they could have, in their monologue, adhered to the ground rules a little bit better. Deanna, you're first. Deanna Philpott.
I've got it. Thank you very much. Okay, I think I can do this. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate both points of view. And I'm just going to, we only have 5 minutes, so I'm just going to mention one thing, and then I'm going to allow my other two judges to give an opinion. Keith, I think you had a lot of facts that were quoted, which was important, and so I compliment you on that. Also, many times you said, I disagree, which is very clearly stating an opinion, and that was important to see. I would like to see, we call this an APB. It's not an all-points bulletin for our police officer today. There he is. But an alternative positive behavior. And I think clarifying without acquisition, without accusing under background checks, black market for guns, things like that, or just some assumptions that perhaps, you know, that need some clarification. Charles, I think that obviously we heard a lot about opinion from you, and I think that was good because you did say many times this is what your opinion was about gun control, elite won't obey, things like that. Gun control has not worked. Probably stating, we probably see the obvious, that is an opinion, but I think what would make your argument stronger would be, you quoted a lot of examples from various countries, but I think actually statistics like that would help your argument a lot. And again, I think that ground rule number 5 about seeking the truth is something I'd like to see both of you work on.
Trip you here. Okay, thanks guys. Just some of the notes I took down. One, respect both of you guys. It takes courage to get up here and state these things in your opinion. I think you did really well on most of these. I think you showed respect and good motives, and you moved through these. The part that I kept getting hung up on with both is consistently clarifying your statement with, this is my opinion about this, and this is an actual fact about this thing. So if it's a fact, you know, something we can go look at and read and research, versus from what you know, this is your opinion. So if you could, as we move forward, say, this is my opinion, and this is what I know to be a fact, that would be helpful. You didn't blame the person too much, not each other, but outside of this room, just a couple statements that could get us there. Both they dance in the blood of innocence could be something that was said that could cause us to think you're blaming the other side. And you said the fantasies that are being rained upon us by who? Those people, right? So that could be blame. And just those kinds of statements as you move forward is, we'll be careful not to blame, but say this is my opinion of what I know, and move forward.
Sorry, I guess I'll move over here. I agree with both of my judges that this takes a lot of courage to get up here and state your opinion and to share facts with us. And I got to know both of you all yesterday evening when we had dinner, and I've been looking forward to this all day, and I think you guys both did a very good job of sharing a lot of information. A lot of this has already been said, but from my perspective, giving more concrete information. You gave some information, Keith, on the Constitution that I thought was really interesting. About a weapon to defend that you already own for other purposes was interesting to me. I didn't understand that. So sharing really great factual information like that and referencing it, I thought was really helpful. Charles, you did some of the same things with referencing Chicago and England and Israel, and more details on that, just like you said about having people that know firearms in the conversation. There was a reference that they've been left out. There was some blame there. So from my perspective, I'd like to understand, what does that mean? Are there specific instances? How does that work? So that we can better understand the true fact, hopefully understand the facts and get to the truth a little bit better. So those are my comments.
Okay, thanks to the judges, and I will say all three of the judges have been a part of our business, learning the ground rules in a separate context from this, and it was incredibly exciting to hear complete understanding of what we're trying to go through with blame the process, not the person, and clarifying opinion from fact. So that's very exciting to me. Thank you all for supporting our ground rules so well. I forgot to mention at the beginning of the event, I will now begin to moderate only in the sense of catching where I see ground rule violations. And if I see serious, not minor, but serious ground rule violations, we'll toss a football to the, says tackle with tack 4 football, to the various panelists. 3 footballs disqualify you. So, stay in check here.
But no, we were shooting trap out about a shotgun. Pull!
Okay, so I would also agree that in both of the
That's
monologues...
That's illegal in Louisville, isn't it? Downtown.
Probably so. Gun laws. I would also agree that there, in both of the monologues, there is definite respect in the way you are saying things, but with a reserved underlying blame of the other side. On both sides, really? I would say that you're tempted to believe that the other side is just full of crap. Okay, so I challenge that the other side is not full of crap and has valid points, and so let's just continue in that thought as we go forward. So I will stay silent until I need to jump in. So for this point forward, the panelists, we don't have any questions to ask. It is just, where did you hear something from the other side that you would like to challenge? Free for all. Begin.
I guess I will start and kind of ask a question. So we heard that we have 20,000 gun laws. I cannot even for the life of me imagine what all of those gun laws must be, but I have to assume that probably what that means is 1 or 2 per city, town, burg in the country, and when you add those all up, certainly there aren't 20,000 federal laws or state-level laws. So the fact that there are a lot of laws in the country, I think is kind of a red herring, when probably the vast majority of those laws say the same thing. More importantly...
Can I ask for a response? That's a
okay.
Good question.
Well, a great many of them don't say the same thing. I mean, great many, when you look at the political process, as I have been involved with it for the last many years, specifically working in Kentucky with the concealed carry laws and all the things that tie into that as far as individual firearms rights. Each state is a hodgepodge of a lot of different things, and they all address different things. One of the things that's not being addressed in the gun control issue is that this is not a homogeneous single entity country. There are a great many cultural aspects, and the gun control movement has assiduously avoided trying to come to terms with the cultural elements of it. The guy who owns a gun in Kentucky is not the teenager breaking the law in Chicago, yet they're trying to come up with one-size-fits-all things. And we've had to deal with a lot of, we're trying to avoid blame, but one of the things that needs to be brought out as a fact in this discussion is there's a lot of inflammatory terminology that's used by anti-gun people that does not help the debate at all. For instance, the term assault
Can I
weapon.
chime in for a second?
Go ahead.
I do deeply agree, and I deeply agree that it's on both sides. And in fact, I think what you were headed to is just saying that there's 20,000 laws when the reality is that many of those are
Well,
duplicated state laws, that could be considered political positioning.
it's more
just saying
useful
that.
rhetorically than it is substantively or constructively.
Not when it illustrates the point that laws have not done anything to change criminal behavior. You know, and when we're trying to have more laws,
You could categorize the laws into the 5 buckets that they fall into, and then you could say, we have 5 laws, one of which is repeated 19,000 times, and none of those 5 laws have done what we think.
Except
But when
that-
we say it's 20,000, it leads to a different understanding of what the nature of the problem is.
when you examine the laws, as I have done, as a lot of people in the issue have done, it becomes apparent that there are a great many small details where the devil resides, and that makes all those laws different to one degree or another. Now, yes, there are certain categories of things that they do, but there's a really good-selling book in the United States called The Traveler's Guide to the Firearms Laws of the 50 States, and it just begins to touch on how many laws and pitfalls there are. You know, it's like locks only keep an honest man honest. Laws only keep the law-abiding from knowing what they're not supposed to do, but it also gives them pits to fall into. And laws are a morass of things that can trip people up. We have people constantly being tried and convicted for laws that in some cases they didn't know even exist, or that government entities have abused. And that's our point about the laws. The laws are a huge snare. They're a net. And they're not making us safer. If the law made us safer, it would require that everybody obeyed it. And we want gun control. What is gun control but laws? Gun control as it existed prior to the enactment of most of these laws was something that people learned from their families. They learned it from their institutions. They learned it from their schools. They learned it from their civic organizations. And if those things have been progressively less effective in teaching kids how to behave, you know, what we'd like to see a law. We'd like to see a law that requires firearms education for children, because and here's a fact for you. In a situation where children who have had firearms education have been exposed to guns and told not to touch them, and children who were the children of those who either did not have guns in the home or actively advocated to the children that the possession of guns were bad, left to their own devices without adult supervision, the children raised in homes with firearms behave the most responsibly. And that's something that ABC News found out to their chagrin when they conducted this study. So there's a fact for you. We cannot make citizens out of laws. One of the things the founders said was, when this nation stops being a nation guided by God's rules, then we will begin to die and begin to fall apart. Now, that's a paraphrase of something that many, many, many of the founders said again and again and again, both in public speech and in their private correspondence. Now, I'm not advocating for a religious solution. What I'm saying is that when there are principles, you don't have to have so many laws, because people come to right behavior intuitively. Now we have a snare of laws, and gun control has not
It seems
worked.
to me that maybe we could find some kind of agreement, although I have a hunch not, that we could agree to a national standardization of the legal framework that surrounds guns, and we could have one set of overarching policies that would sweep away 19,500 of the laws, and then maybe leave some amount of leeway for the local and cultural variations that Charles is saying need to exist in different parts of the country. The fact is that city people face different challenges with their life than rural people. I'm not anti-gun. City people can usually count on the fact that the police will be there within a short period of time. Country people, it could be 20 minutes. When I was a younger person, I ran ambulance, and it would easily take us 20 minutes to get to rural areas. That may not be fast enough. It's a different situation, may require a tweak on the laws. But we could standardize all of those laws, sweep thousands and thousands of them so it's not so confusing, and have a uniform, just like we have uniform commercial code, we can have a uniform gun code.
Let me see if we have agreement. Do you at least agree city different than country, different needs, therefore possibly need for different laws?
That's certainly the case, but the
So
problem...
we have some agreement. We found one thing that we agree on. That's good. Keep going.
The problem with that, of course, is that most of these things that gun control advocates are pushing for is at the federal level. And I know that one of the things that you all are trying very hard to accomplish in your debate format and structure here is to avoid assigning malign motives. But one of the things that we have had to deal with is the fact that when you start digging into things, you find that the pro-gun control people have many times attempted to use federal law because they haven't been able to accomplish things at a state level. And the states
Can
have
I challenge the
rebelled.
because? Is that the reason?
I don't know or care. The fact of the matter is what we have is resulting in children dying, and we need to make some changes to what we have. Now, whether you'd like those changes to be made at the federal level or the state level, or whether you want 50,000 laws instead of 20,000 laws, or whether you want 5 that cover everything, I'm fine either way. It doesn't really matter to me. What I want to get to is the point where these weapons are less available than they are right now, that there are sane limits on what we can get our hands on, what different people can get our hands on, that we can, I think, we have a situation, we talked about, all of these laws. I don't know what the content of all those 20,000 laws, but there's a gaping hole in our laws. We've set up a system of constitutionally protected background checks where we can do background checks on gun purchases, but then we've poked this gaping hole in them with the private gun sales and the gun show laws that don't require background checks. So all of the criminals just take the easier option. 88% of the guns, and unfortunately I don't remember where I saw the statistic, I read it, 88% of the guns used in crimes that result in people being incarcerated were not bought through dealers that did background checks. Now, whether they were bought on the black market or whether they were bought at gun shows, they were not bought through dealers that did background checks.
Especially given that he doesn't know the source. Is that a statistic you agree with?
No. I'm very concerned not to try to get into a back and forth over statistics because, as Mark Twain has so famously observed about statistics, liars lie and people use statistics to lie more. So
it is the foundation of our clarifying opinion from fact. Yes.
This is one of the things that I find most troubling about attempting any kind of rational debate. We're starting off with the use of the term assault weapon, which Josh Sugarman of the Violence Policy Center admitted that he coined in 1998 for the express purpose of terrifying the uneducated, the uninformed. There are no such things as assault weapons. The only thing that's that comes close to being an assault weapon is a large cannon mounted on tracked vehicles used in military actions. Assault rifles are fully automatic, and they've been heavily regulated by the National Firearms Act since 1934. So, here's something that illustrates very well the problem that we have in trying to come up with a dialogue with people who want to ban guns. If you look at this picture...
Which, by the way, is not me.
All right. Well, we're talking about gun control. We're talking about ever more draconian attempts. All 3 of those guns are going to terrify somebody for some reason or other. But the one in the middle and the one at the bottom have cosmetic features that are going to make them illegal under various law proposals. They're already going to be illegal in New York City. What's the problem with that? The problem is they're all the same gun. The mechanism has not been changed. The magazine well has not been changed. The manner in which it operates, firing 1 round with each press of the trigger, has not been changed. What has been changed? Hand grips, stocks, nothing else. So my point is that gun control proponents have been disingenuous, and it makes it difficult for us to discuss it rationally and to offer proposals. You look at Mr. Obama's...
Can I get a comment on the disingenuous?
I'd just like to offer one last thing. Let me make one clarification.
There's an issue with that in that I'm not going to necessarily say that all of the gun law that is out there today is good law. A law that differentiates these types of weapons based on cosmetic features is idiocy. That should be fixed. At the same time, should be possible for us to agree on a maximum fire rate, a maximum number of times that a gun can be fired without being reloaded, that everybody should be able to agree would meet a rational purpose. I don't want to develop a system of laws that is just stupid. That would be stupid. But I
think I heard you imply that many of the laws we have today are idiocy. Is that correct?
If he's saying that these laws differentiate based on purely cosmetic factors, then I would say that's a stupid law.
Okay,
it
then
doesn't
let
make
me,
any sense
let
to
me
have,
ask
but
you
it
this.
doesn't invalidate the possibility of having a smart law. And we should work to find what that smart law would be.
Okay, 2 points. One, you've called for the assault weapons ban. First of all, you're talking about guns that don't exist. But you, by your own statements, have said that that law is idiocy. Excuse me, Mr. Rouda.
Okay.
That law is primarily centering around cosmetic features, bayonet lugs, pistol grips that project below the weapon, various other things of that sort. It is primarily cosmetic. It does not address its matter of function. So by your own statement, the law is idiotic. Secondly, when you start getting into the business of what constitutes appropriate features, you've already said that you accept Scalia's interpretation of the Constitution and the Second Amendment as it relates to a well-regulated militia. If we're going to be able to bear militia weapons, then that means a parity with those that are presently in military use. And that's what the Second Amendment said. That's what it was put in there for. Okay, so you've got an idiotic assault weapons ban based on a name that was made up for the specific purpose of terrifying people. Where's the honesty in that?
Okay. So what I would say is that in the proposal that Obama and Biden have put forward, they call for a reinstatement and reworking of the assault weapons ban because we all recognize that a ban on weapons that is based on cosmetic features is not useful.
Do we all recognize that? I mean, we apparently didn't in 1998.
Okay.
Obviously, Feinstein does not.
But I think, but Feinstein's law is not what's going to be reinstated. What Obama and Biden have said is that we should reinstate the assault weapons ban and rework it so that it means something. And secondly, with respect to the militia and the Scalia argument, he specifically stated that, and I read the quote, he specifically stated that the fact that times have changed and small arms may not any longer be capable of beating back bombers and tanks, he specifically said the Supreme Court does not recognize that as valid reason for reinterpreting the Second Amendment. He continues to believe that even though that may be the case, and even though we may not be able to have as an effective a militia as we had in the 18th century, that alone does not change the facts.
Well,
now we could change the Constitution. Might work with you to do that. But the way it's written today, Scalia says, does not require the militia to be able to have military-grade weapons.
As a student of firearms and history, and having been raised around firearms from both their technical and historical aspects in my entire life, one of the most difficult things is to attempt to compress into 30 or 40 minutes of argumentation in a forum like this or anywhere else military history. You talk about what you can accomplish with small arms. Well, as I recall, the entire Russian Empire was held off by a handful of ragheads in the hills of Afghanistan using bolt-action rifles that dated back to the First World War. And they did so quite successfully for a long time. It's called guerrilla warfare. So when you start talking about the mechanisms, you're losing sight of what the key issue here. The key issue here is that gun owners are being demonized as advocating things that are not correct. We've already talked about the fact that the assault weapon terminology is a misnomer. It's an outright fabrication and an attempt to sway public opinion. You made a statement during your first presentation that automatic weapons are illegal. They're not. This is another thing. You can possess automatic weapons in the Commonwealth of Kentucky if you have a tax stamp and have gone through the necessary steps as defined in the National Firearms Act of 1934. They are completely different. it is so exceedingly difficult to make these arguments and to try to reach people, which we're trying to do, when education is so lacking. And a good first step for all of this would be for children to be taught firearms safety. We know it works. And there's Mr. Obama saying we need a national gun education program. He did not once mention the preeminent organization in this nation and the largest group of gun educators in this nation, and that's the NRA and the gun owners and educators who are already out there. He didn't bring us up. He excluded us. Matt, where's the inclusiveness in this? This is a problem I have with this. We're willing to work. We're willing to step up. But we're not being included. We're not being asked. The idea is that...
In fact, there are so many things to comment on there. I think in part, at the beginning, you made my case when you were talking about small arms being able to hold off the entire Russian army. That makes the case that that in order to fulfill the Second Amendment defense against an overbearing federal government, we need to have parity of weapons, as not necessarily the case. So I think that's a good thing and certainly feeds into the Scalia argument. I think the education of, providing gun education to kids, I have no issue with that. There are education programs sprinkled throughout the 30 proposals that Obama is making. He may not have specifically called out the NRA by name and included them, but they were at the table when this was being pulled together, and he didn't specifically exclude them either. He didn't say anybody can provide this education except for the NRA. It doesn't go into that level of detail. It says education would be a good thing.
Do you agree? I heard a comment saying that this side tends to be demonized for things that they don't even hold true. Can I hear that sounded like a blame that I would love to hear whether you agree or disagree with that comment.
I won't say that there is never any demonization that goes on. Both sides of the argument run hot. A lot of things are said by a lot of people. In a country of 315 million people, probably everything is going to be said at least once.
Do you agree that our side also demonizes that side for things that may not be true of?
Having observed the back and forth that goes on both at the political and the individual level in the media, the problem I have with attempting to find an equivalence there is that there consistently is a pass given to inflammatory language by anti-gunners. People who've done the research on it, and of course, one of the things I urge everybody who's participating here tonight to do, make a note of anything I say, and go do the digging in the Media Research Center. Go do the digging in our fact sheets. There's a vast array of information that's out there that will verify what I'm telling you. And they have done the studies that show that mentions of gun owners have been overwhelmingly negative, and that those people who say things about the NRA wants everybody to be ready to die.
Has that been me tonight?
No, that's not what I'm talking about, sir. We're talking about gun control. And
I'm talking about gun control too.
Okay, but we're trying to talk about national solutions.
We can spend a lot of time talking about what happens outside the room, but if we're going to talk about the policy and the issues here, we may as well keep it to inside the room, and I don't think I've done that.
Okay, but then if you want to talk about fantasies, believing that what we do in here tonight can be discussed, divorced from the greater national discussion that's absolutely mandatory, is a fantasy.
But perhaps what we talk about here can inform those conversations.
And I just want to point out, clarifying opinion from fact, that the study that was done, most all studies have opinions on them. So it's a valid study, probably. But
a valid study by the Media Research Center, when you take 100 stories and you say in this many stories there was this many mentions of this individual or group, and in this many stories there are this many mentions, that's statistics. And those,
as you said, people lie with statistics.
Okay,
I'm not saying you're lying at all. I'm just saying point out.
As I have said,
your opinion
as a corollary to that, please, by all means, go out and verify these things. Because I'm not going to try to bury people under statistics. I'm trying to open your eyes and tell you that there's something out there besides what you're picking up every day in the media. There is a great deal of information try to go out there and get it and see if it doesn't open your eyes and change your mind just a little bit.
I certainly agree with that. I can't quibble with the need for people to go out and do some research. And I'm not particularly interested in quibbling over whether the media portrays this side better or that side better. If we want to have a media debate, we can have a media debate. Maybe we can do that next week. But I think, in the meantime, it's a diversion from what we're here to talk about, which is how do we stop children from being killed? How do we stop 10,500 homicides by gun every year? How do we stop 1.5 million gun deaths over my lifetime? I'm not blaming gun owners for this thing. I support the right to own guns. I will defend alongside him our Second Amendment rights until and unless the Constitution is changed. But all of those things go to divert the fact from the idea that we have to do something. We can't do nothing.
So on the solution that you've advocated, which I believe is Obama's proposal, is that correct? Can you tell me more about, given his points about that automatic weapons aren't even listed in there, or where they are listed, that it's more cosmetic as opposed to something that is less idiotic per your definition? What is the solution then? What is the gun control law that you think would work? Is that a valid question?
Well, I think what Wayne LaPierre said a week after the Newtown shooting, and what Joe Biden said, what Obama has said, what everybody has said, well, maybe not everybody, a lot of people have said, is that it's going to be a complicated solution. It's a complex problem. It's going to require a complex solution. It's not going to be one law. But I would maintain that bans on certain military style or grade weapons, I don't care about cosmetics. You're the expert, find the words that draw the line that's reasonable for us to have and not have. It's reasonable to ban certain types of weapons. I don't think we have a lot of people in here probably advocating for common use of the armor-piercing bullets. That seems to be, by and large, agreed that we can do without those on the streets. But those are three factors in the proposal. One is the, quote, assault weapons ban, 2 is large magazine clips, and 3 is the armor-piercing bullets. The entire rest of the 27 proposals go to educating people. They go to funding for studies. They go to doing research and reports. They go to clarifying confusing regulations that overlap between agencies and really don't make sense. They go to communicating out what the actual existing law is that sometimes is understood. The proposals are the background check proposals. There is a proposal to make sure that federal agencies that are required by Congress to share information with the background check and have never done so, do so. Congress told them decades ago, you have to provide this information. They never had. One of the proposals in here, they should do it. There are some states that say the HIPAA laws, Healthcare Information Portability Privacy Act, preclude them from sharing certain mental health information with the background check database. One of the proposals is that we should look into that. If that's the case, maybe those regulations need to change.
I hear a lot of ideas. Any of these ideas helpful?
The 1994 gun ban on semi-automatic weapons, mistakenly and deliberately mistakenly called the assault weapons ban, expired. It did not make, according to the FBI, again, this information is out there if you want to go to the FBI and find it, that it made no discernible impact on fatalities or on crime. Secondly, armor-piercing ammunition is already illegal and has been for some time. So this illustrates the problem that we've got. We keep going around. You mentioned red herrings. AP ammunition is a red herring. It is already illegal. Nobody's advocating anything of this sort. You keep avoiding, and it sounds like I'm blaming, okay? I know I'm not supposed to do that. What is generally avoided, either deliberately or otherwise, for whatever motivation there is the fact that we go back to what works. Israel is a perfect example. Every time that a person attempting to commit homicide or violent crime is confronted by an armed individual whether that person is a police officer or a private citizen, the likelihood that that crime will be stopped either immediately or in the immediate aftermath is virtually 100%. You know, you can go through all the statistics and find it where there has been an armed citizen or police officer. They have stopped their depredation. Many of them have committed suicide. So we're dancing around the one salient fact that no one can rebut in any discussion I've heard or seen to date.
Let's see if you can.
Armed individuals are the only thing that stop homicides from being committed.
I'm hearing a proposed solution.
Okay. So what I would say is there is nothing in the proposal that defines gun control today that would preclude that. There's nothing that I've said that would lead to lower rates of gun ownership. Maybe we need to double gun ownership.
Is that
I
true?
don't necessarily think so, but there's nothing in this proposal that goes to that.
When you put into place a ban on a particular class of weapon based solely on its cosmetics or its perceived militaristic characteristics.
Which I've said we should not do.
No, sir, that's not the case. I'd hate to rebut and resort to conventional debate tactics, but what you said is that the assault weapons ban was one of 30 points that were a good thing and a good idea.
And that it needed to be reworked, and the proposal calls for that rework.
After you were challenged on certain key elements of it, sir. Okay, you accepted it as a blanket proposal initially.
Two more minutes, by the way.
Okay, so bottom line is it's time to quit being phobic about firearms and time to quit obsessing on their particular characteristics and everything and work on those things that actually make a difference. And those things, again and again and again, are armed people exercising their rights or their duties, stopping crime, and creating a culture that doesn't demonize gun ownership.
So I want to recharacterize the proposal that's on the table. When we talk about armor-piercing bullets, what the proposal says is finish the job of getting armor-piercing bullets off the streets. It's already illegal to manufacture and import armor-piercing ammunition, except for military and law enforcement use. But it is generally still not illegal to possess or transfer this dangerous ammunition. Congress should finish the job of protecting law enforcement and the public by banning the possession of armor-piercing ammunition by and its transfer to anyone other than military and law enforcement. I think you're in agreement with this, and yet you want to portray it, it seems to me, as something that it's not.
Meaning as phobic toward gun owners.
As phobic towards gun owners, or unnecessary, or in some way demonizing, or
The way that gun owners see what's been attempted so far and what's being attempted again, it's amazing how long these lists of proposals become. I wonder if these people are sit up at nights. But, for gun owners, it's like being nibbled to death by ducks. And that's basically the kind of attitude we have toward it at this point in time. We
wouldn't want to be nibbled to death by ducks.
We keep telling you what works. We keep telling you what works in Israel. We keep showing you what has not in England and Bermuda and in Mexico, and the list goes on. And we keep not being heard, and that's the big problem from our perception.
I would say you're also not listening or reading the proposal. I think all of these gun owners that are so upset, I would question how many of them have actually read these 30 points and recommendations.
I would ask you how many of them are new or are not yet just in another iteration of something we've been dealing with for the last 40 years.
Okay.
Fair enough.
We had a fair enough as the final comment. I love it. Okay, thanks to both panelists. Actually, I'd love for a round of applause for fantastic, respectful debate. Okay, Donna, am I correct that it's time for audience participation? That is correct. Okay.
Voting procedures. Everyone should have a ballot. If you do not have a ballot, raise your hand, and we will give you a
So
if you're from Chicago, we have extra ballots.
So if you need a ballot,
If
raise
you
your
have any
hand.
dead relatives, we have ballots for them.
And Eileen, are you audience selecting? Is that right? Thank you very much. So
I'll be giving out pints of whiskey and packs of cigarettes. Those extra people you want to drag in to vote. It's a standard Kentucky tradition.
Yes, that's perfect. No, that's perfect right there. So Eileen is going to select audience members to come up. Anyone who wants to make a comment or ask a question? Up here, Rudy. Rudy, up front. Up front. Okay.
Hi. I just wanted to make a comment.
And 3 minutes, by the way. And also remember, ground rules are we will be judging or advocating.
I have
the
3
ground rules.
minutes? Or the
Yes,
whole
you have,
thing?
You have 3 minutes as well.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Up to 3 minutes.
I don't think I'll take that. But,
Okay, good.
I just wanted to talk about the process. This would have been so much more interesting if you went with the whole getting down to what are you afraid of?
The whys.
The why.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been interesting, and that's what I was looking forward to. I was kind of, just to be perfectly honest, I was disappointed because it was just the same old stuff. Okay?
Honestly, I agree with you, and I want help. So give me more help on getting there, and I
Okay.
agree with you. Yes.
Well, if it were phrased that way, that this is what you're doing, and I would want to hear from Charles my suspicion that he's looking at the slippery slope, and he's also feeling that he's eaten by ducks. Okay, but let me just but that if you fed, see, if I just fed him something, he's going to come back with maybe closer to what it really is. But I would really wish we had gone after that.
Let's
Okay,
go there right
do
now.
it?
We still have
Do you want
2
to
minutes
respond
go.
to my suspicion and get closer to what it is?
No, it's
what
not-
is the ultimate thing you're trying
The
to
slippery
get at?
slope obviously is something that's a matter of concern, but the biggest concern that I have is that try as we might, when we have presented the facts and when we looked at those and made valid comparisons of what works and what doesn't, basically it's been avoided, walked around. There hasn't been an honest discussion of it. The people who are most emphatic about trying to stop firearms and increase firearms regulation is that, what I'm afraid of is that we will continue to find that people are not prepared to understand what has worked, and they will continue to argue from a position of ignorance with using false and inflammatory language like assault weapon and talking about machine guns and engage in rhetoric that has been defamatory and unhelpful. And that's what I'm afraid of. It's not changed.
Ask the deeper question.
Yeah. What? Well, I think you could probably do it better. You're better at this. But we didn't get there, right? Do you
Yes,
agree?
I agree.
Okay. And I'm not excluding you, Keith, because I want you. I want to hear, but I'm more on your side, so I have a sense of what that might be. But I would be interested to hear that. Go ahead. Can you try to dig it out a little bit?
Deanna? What we're wanting is the why. That's what we're asking, right? Why is it that we feel that there's not an honest debate? Why is it that we feel like we aren't being heard on our side? Is that the right question?
Isn't that apparent? I mean, I don't want to sound smug or condescending, but, as I've been saying throughout this period, when you look at the media coverage of the issue, when you look at the continued use of, it's
Okay,
like
so
if
what
you,
I'm
if you
hearing-
belong to an ethnic group, and you continuously hear your ethnic customs misrepresented, you continuously hear your foods or your belongings or your musical instruments or your traditions misrepresented and distorted, and when you attempt to put those things out there as actual facts, and you're either rebuffed or ignored, and the abuse, as it were, continues, and the distortion and the misrepresentation becomes the lingua franca, what people generally and traditionally use in discussing you. How else can you feel? I mean, pick a group. Any one of you, pick the
So-
ethnicity that
so
you
what I'm
belong to,
hearing is
pick
that
your
we're feeling
religion,
blamed on
pick
this
your
side.
culture. How many times have you heard somebody say something about you that you knew to be wrong, and you said to yourself, when is that going to stop?
So
I thought, all right,
Yes.
sir,
That's what it's like to be on either side of a political argument. You always feel that way at the others. What is it that you? Maybe this. Let me try this
Go.
question.
Go.
What is it, Charles? What is it? What is it that you would lose from the proposal on Keith's desk, personally? What would you lose in terms of weaponry, in terms of rights, in terms of concealed carry? What would you lose?
That's not the issue here. I'm sorry. I'm not going to attempt to address it. I've made it plain what I was talking about, and you're beating a dead horse, as it were. I'm sorry, sir, but
I don't understand. I would actually love that question answered.
What would I lose without looking at the 30 proposals? I can't go into specifics, but I can tell you based. I'm going to read 30 proposals right
we
now.
can't do that now.
Come on. Now this. Hold it. Whoa. Now here's an illustration. I'm being put on the defensive, okay, to come up with a global answer to an extremely complex question. To say what? To offer you some panacea?
Okay, but see, so
Everything is going to be well when we do this, my little ones.
What
that
I would
doesn't
say
work.
is that you came to a debate about gun control, prepared to debate against the straw man arguments that have been out there for years, and not to discuss the proposal that's actually on the national debate.
Well, he has at least mentioned several things that you have said that were not helpful. And he said why they weren't helpful. He has not said what he would lose, from what I've heard, but he has at least said these specific things that you've said would not help.
All right, I'll just tell you one thing. Under the present proposal from Dianne Feinstein, assisted by Senator Frank Lautenberg and their other allies in the Congress, I would lose a particular firearm which I now possess. I would be forbidden from transferring it to another individual. It would, at some point in time, when, based on historical record, those restrictions were insufficient, they would ask for more. And this is the thing. Now, you talk about the slippery slope. Yes, the slippery slope is very much a reality. Every time that gun control proponents have gone to the well and have gotten something, when it didn't work, it was the fault of the guns, not of bad society, not of cultural failures, not of the other things that go along. You know, when you take kids who behave well with guns and you compare them to kids who don't behave well with guns, and you make public policy for everybody based on the ones who misbehave, who do you punish? You punish the good kids. So the slippery slope has always been, this doesn't work. We must have more. And it leads us to England. What am I afraid of? I'm afraid of living in a country like England, where the Magna Carta has ceased to be the law of the land. And I don't want our Constitution to become a mockery.
Okay, let's get another question. Oh, okay. So pass your votes to where? The center. Thank you, Rudy. Eric, you're next.
Well, I just want to say thanks to both of you. This was really terrific, and I learned a lot, from both sides. I think what would help me, and this is probably a question for you, Keith. It seems like, I'm really concerned about, I'm not so much concerned with people that go through background checks and maybe the people in this room that own guns. I'm more concerned about the person that breaks into my house and I'm left to defend myself with my skills of negotiation against somebody that's got a Glock. That's kind of what I'm concerned about. And so I don't know if you have any data or really resources for me to check out that based on sort of the proposals on the table, what types of gun safety measures can ensure that as the result of these measures that criminals will be less likely to be able to have access to guns. That's something I'm concerned about. Do you have any insight into that?
I have some. I probably won't be able to cite a whole lot of facts and figures, but what I will say is that when we opened up the gun show loophole that allows people to buy guns with no background check at these gun shows, 40% of the guns in the country are now purchased through these gun shows with no background checks. It stands to reason, I will say this is an opinion, I don't know data on it, but it certainly stands to reason that if I were a criminal and I wanted to get guns and I knew that by going to a legal gun dealer that was going to do a background check, I was not going to be able to get my gun, I would go to a gun show instead where I could get it regardless of my history. By closing that loophole, what we're going to do is we're probably going to expand the size of the true black market. The gun shows are not a black market. It's a legal market. It just doesn't, it's not subject to certain regulations. We're going to expand the size of the black market where people go to buy guns illegally, but we're not going to expand it to the size of, maybe we'd call it the gray market today. So I think by forcing criminals to go to a black market to buy guns, we're going to make them less available, and we're going to increase the price because of the risk premiums that are going to be associated with those sales. I think those things would decrease the amount of guns that are in the hands of criminals, not by any stretch of the imagination eliminate them.
Comment?
The problem with the so-called gun show loophole is it didn't open. It's always existed. It's called free enterprise and capitalist market. Private owners selling their property is a part of gun shows. It does not account for 40% of the guns. Most of the guns used in crime, according to the U.S. Department of Justice statistics, and again, I'm going to throw it out there so you can write it down, so you can dig it out and look it up, because I'm not going to try to cite date and time, show that criminals obtain their guns through theft, either from each other or from law-abiding citizens. The massacre in Connecticut was committed in violation of a dozen laws. He killed someone to take lawfully owned weapons and use them in an illegal fashion. That illustrates the problem. When criminals go to a gun show, if they attempt to buy from a licensed dealer, they're going to have to go through the federal NICS check just like they would anywhere else. That's not exempted. Gun shows are not some place where when you walk in the door, the laws go away. Dealers are not going to sell you a gun if you can't pass the background check. We start talking about unlicensed dealers. Unlicensed dealers are called citizens. People who engage in commerce and trafficking firearms in excess of selling a few here, selling a few there, out of their own personal possessions are called criminals. And it's already a violation of federal law for those people to do that. Sloppy enforcement by federal agencies accounts for a large loss of this. If you do the reading over the years from people who used to work for BATFE and have decried the fact that they have given them investigations and said, I know this guy is selling guns. And I said, well, that's not what we're worried about. We're not going to get to that. We've got something else we have to do. Sometimes that's legitimate, sometimes it's not. Bottom line is that guns are not just swarming out of these gun shows. There's not these huge numbers. What do you want to do to stop criminals from getting guns? Stop letting them out of prison. The first charge that's thrown away in a homicide or any other criminal charge on somebody, and you can ask the police officer there, ask any of your law enforcement personnel, or you can go to the county attorney and do the work on this, is the gun charge. Why? Because it's the charge that carries the most weight. So when you're plea bargaining and you're a district attorney trying to get a conviction and you're a defense attorney trying to get your client off with the least charge you possibly can, what's the first thing that they want to bargain over? The gun charge. So let's throw out the gun charge and let's talk about the rest of it, because the rest of it is not going to cost you nearly as much as being convicted on a gun charge. So we have to stop that. We have to stop plea bargains. If you want a comprehensive discussion of what's wrong with the business about talking about gun shows and how they're this cornucopia of guns for criminals, read something by a really competent attorney named David Koppel, K-O-P-E-L, and he speaks specifically about it, and he expands on it with far more detail and far more comprehensive view of it than I possibly could.
Okay.
David Koppel, K-O-P-E-L, talking about the fallacy of the gun show loophole.
Let's move on to the next audience member here. Did you still have a comment? I did want to go ahead, but I did want to point out one thing, thanks to the sir here, the prior question. He did ultimately answer your question. I'm not saying he answered it fantastically perfect the way you wanted to, but he fought through. Yeah, you did. Sorry. But he fought through what he was feeling as blame. Thanks to your question, thanks to the ground rules, we actually said, what is the real answer? Maybe we didn't get all the way down to the bottom, but this is progress. Thank you for bringing up the question. Okay.
Well, like the first guy, I'm a little frustrated. I came here already decided where I was on this argument, and I'm still in the same place. I really wanted to watch the ground rules, and I was hoping both of you would get to what do we want to accomplish, and but the key question that y'all are debating is, does gun control work, or does it stop crime, or I can't remember the exact words. And you've both done excellently on your standard arguments, so it didn't get down to any basics. Like, I think you'd agree we both want fewer children being murdered, but let's say anybody being murdered. Now, how does gun control get to that or not? And
ask the question. Seriously.
all right, how does gun control, well, can we assume you're both against murder with any weapon, but we're talking about guns?
I'm against people being disarmed. I'm against people being deprived of the means to be able to defend themselves. I'm against people who don't know what they're talking about.
Charles, you've made that clear,
Yes, sir.
but there's a statistic I
okay.
can't believe you haven't brought up, and I'm not a statistics guy, but he's pushing for gun control. You're worried about the slippery slope. I understand.
No,
both
sir, I
sides.
told you why gun control doesn't work. I've told you. I said from the
Why
beginning.
not ask what gun ownership has done to stem crime and to save lives? Because FBI statistics, I think as recently as 2011, say there's 600,000 plus uses of guns legally, which is what the Second Amendment probably had in mind outside of the militia. And there needs to be an argument from that side.
Yeah, well, I would say two things if I can remember them. Certainly one is that nothing that we're talking about today, and this is where we end up with the straw man arguments. Nobody who is proposing, none of the proposals on the table are designed or will have the impact of reducing gun ownership.
But you're back to selling the proposal versus gun control stopping crime.
Well, but okay, so I'm saying that
It would
gun
reduce
control-
certain gun ownership.
Well, I'm saying gun control is, it can mean a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. In Australia, it meant one particular approach to things that did involve confiscation. There was, compensation, but it did also involve confiscation of certain weapons, and it had an enormous impact in reducing the number of murders in Australia.
In the first 10 years after that went through, the Australian crime rate skyrocketed. So again, we're talking. I've said from the very beginning, gun control as it's in this country does not
The
work.
important thing, though, is that we're not talking about confiscating guns. Nobody is talking about confiscating guns in this country. Now, the slippery
Well,
slope,
that's
the
your
logical
opinion of that
extreme.
proposal. Where has gun control stopped issues like we're dealing with?
Well, what
in recent
kind of
history?
gun control are you talking? Are you talking about proposals that are not on the table?
When you're
Chicago.
describing your proposal, you even said it sounded like you were reading it as if Biden or the president were frustrated that this agency should be doing this and we're going to make them do it. Isn't that a killer to your rule that laws work? You're describing proposals saying we're going to enforce this rule that we've already made. That just means more law. And how does it stop crime? And I'm not picking sides here because there's
I'm hearing you say, I want to know an actual gun control law that has worked. If you
To
show
the
me
top-
one that's worked and helped, that would be useful.
To the topic, I'd like both sides to say that, but get down to what we're going to assume is our need, I think that's the way your stuff works, our need is to prevent murders.
And I said, what stops violent crime is armed individuals. The FBI
And I
statistics,
said nothing that would challenge the
the
existence of
Justice
armed
Department statistics show
So what would
that
then
private individuals armed kill 3 times as many armed criminals every year as the police do. Now, if you want to talk, and I've said this repeatedly, what works is not cowering and trying to regulate an instrument. What works is empowering people and allowing them to exercise their
Sorry to
rights.
interrupt because I'm the audience, Alan. I'm going to lean on you because I honestly don't know. I want to learn these rules.
Good.
How do you help the two debaters get closer to finding out one of you's wrong or both of you are wrong and there's a better place, or you're just going to agree to disagree. That's not the way you say it in your rules.
And I hope we don't
I'll
have to
yield.
agree to disagree. That's good. No, that's fantastic. So I am hearing a proposal on the table, which is armed individuals is what reduces violence. And I hear you saying we're not trying to regulate against armed individuals. What I want to hear from you is what reduces violence then? What in your proposal reduces violence? Here's a proposal which is armed individuals reduce violence.
Okay.
What reduces violence?
So we know that what stopped the shooting in Phoenix, where Gabby Giffords was shot, was when the shooter had to reload, he was able to be tackled. One of the proposals in here limits ammunition magazines to 10 rounds, which means unlike in some of the other situations we've had where there's no need to reload for a long time until lots of people have potentially been killed, we want to make sure that there are some opportunities periodically to stop that shooting from happening. Maybe they'll be taken advantage of, maybe they won't be. Certainly having somebody in the audience with a gun, maybe that will help. But they're going to have a lot better chance of using that gun if at some point the guy has to stop. That's one thing.
What stopped him was when the gun malfunctioned, not when he ran out of ammunition. When the gun malfunctioned and he was unable to make it continue. The same thing happened to John Holmes in Colorado.
In Aurora, the gun malfunctioned. In Phoenix, he simply had to reload.
Okay, but I'm not trying to introduce any of my internal politics. I want to ask a specific question. I hear your rational thinking that, because that one incident, since he had to reload, that could have been stopped, or that allowed him to be stopped. What I don't see is the connection then that a law keeping those automatic weapons, I don't see the law actually stopping violence. I see a legislator thinking, hey, because we have a situation where one person was tackled because he had to reload, let's make a law that might control violence.
Yeah.
And the only reason I'm asking this is because I'm seeking the truth, not political position.
So I would say that
I'm not seeing that necessarily proving that
Right.
law would help. So help me.
Well, I don't know that we have proof that it would help. Would it hurt? I think we.
Oh, that's a good question.
There is an answer to that. At Virginia Tech, the individual who was armed there was predominantly armed with 10-round magazines, which he reloaded into the gun at his leisure. And why was he able to do that? Because not a single person in a state where there are concealed carry permit holders was able to resist him with armed force. He was able to do what he did with 10-round magazines at his leisure, unopposed, because he had a gun-free zone, willing victim zone.
I haven't challenged any of that.
So then why have a 10-round ban?
Because a 10-round clip. Also, because you've got a situation where it did not stop the problem from happening. In Arizona, there was a situation where it did stop the problem from happening.
Yes, this is proof by example, which is not proof.
Which is not proof. So at some point you end up with a situation in laws where we can invalidate all of them because how much do we really know? When you throw all of the experience out the door, and we're not making any decisions based on anything that we feel or think, we have speed limits in the country. Can you prove that driving slower stops accidents? I can point to people who drive fast that don't have accidents. I think we have to still have a basis for coming up with laws. We can't just throw the whole framework out the door.
But what I'm hearing but what I heard is that you want to create a law because it might work and it can't hurt.
That seems like a good idea. We have children.
That seems like a
killed.
good idea to have laws that might work and can't hurt.
The people who know the
Laws that are not going
subject.
to hurt, and they might help. Yes, we have children being killed. We have children being killed in large numbers.
Okay,
if we have laws that might stop that and can't hurt, we should do that. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, but the thing is, when we have people who are experts in the subject.
And
we
arm
have
teachers,
we
arm
have
teachers
the,
with my blessing. Arm them all.
we have people who know about the technology, the magazines, the reloading, all of these things that are being thrown around as a part of law proposals. They're called gun owners. They're called instructors. They're called experts. But their input into the discussion is being disparaged and not accessed.
I don't think that's true.
Well,
They were
I
at
just
the table
I
when
just
this
told
was
you
being written.
I can reload a gun so quickly that the magazine capacity is completely immaterial.
Yes, but you're an
Seven,
expert who's been doing this for years, and the buffoon.
And I
in
can
Connecticut
teach a high
and the
schooler to
buffoon
do it in a
Arizona
day.
Did not know how to do that. Not everybody has your level of skill.
They don't have to. They
I'm
just
not trying to protect myself against an experienced, trained gun owner. I'm trying to protect myself against a buffoon.
Okay, we have a question. 5 minutes left. Go for it.
Some of what I've heard just the last few minutes, Dennis Miller said this, and I can't disagree. The nutters are always going to get you. You can't protect yourself against the unimaginable, and much of what we've talked about this evening is, to most of us, unimaginable. That being said, I'm going to move on to what I stepped up to say. I've heard a lot about good laws and bad laws tonight, and I'm wondering, specifically, I guess, for you, Mr. Rouda, I see a lot of these proposals. I have read them, by the way. Some of them are good ideas. They are. Some of them are testing my logic. And I'd like to address one's background check. We want to have a universal background check. Well, I'm formerly a federal firearms license dealer. I know how that works. I've done it many times for many people. I'm regularly at gun shows. I know what goes on there. I've also sold someone a gun on my back porch because they liked it and they wanted it more than I wanted it, and I took their money and they left with it. Federal firearms license dealers are required by law to do that. They keep paperwork. They make a call to the FBI, and when the FBI finishes, they transfer the gun. I go to a gun show with a rifle on my back, a dowel in the barrel with a $500 sign on it. Somebody walks up and says, "I'll give that to you." How will that be enforced? That's my question. A good law is a law that makes sense on its face, that is enforceable, and that has some reasonable expectation of being obeyed. Passing a law like that, to me, is ridiculous, because there is absolutely no way that you can enforce that type of law. And that's just bad law, regardless of my position one way or the other. That's just bad law to me. How do you propose to have a law like this that encompasses 315 million people and not be in the least enforceable?
I see you deeply living Ground Rule 5. You are seeking the truth over political positioning. So you want to know what's truth, what's going to work. Good.
So I actually did not follow your entire question about what would be unenforceable. But what?
Just briefly, if I'm standing at the gun show with a rifle on my back, and someone walks up and says, "Sell me that gun for $400," and I say, "Sure, here you go. Give me the money." How is anyone going to enforce that if I don't choose to step up to one of these dealers who will do this for you anyway for a small fee?
Okay.
Who is going to say, "Oh, Joey, you should have gone and done a background check on that"?
I would say a couple of things. One is I don't know who's going to enforce it, but the fact that sometimes we're going to have people who break laws doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't have the laws. That if you're willing to become a criminal in exchanging that firearm without doing the required background check, then you're going to become a criminal. And where I would follow that up is I would say enforcement never involves prevention. When we enforce the speed limit, we don't prevent people from speeding. We create consequences when we catch them doing it, which is not all the time.
But we also have an enforceable mechanism, and I agree with him. I'm not seeing an enforceable mechanism
But what I would
for
also
this.
say is that one of the things that is not in this proposal that I would like to see, at least I don't think it's in here that I've seen, is management of liability. So that if you do sell the firearm without going through the background check, and we find out, and that gun is used to commit a crime, that you are as liable as the person who committed the crime because you broke the law in supplying the gun to them. Now, that's not in this proposal. That would be just me. But there are ways that we can do it, and it's not a different situation than we have with enforcing any of the other laws that we have on the books, and certainly no reason to not have the law in the first place.
Well, just one last comment. So you're saying that we create an entirely new class of criminal to take care of 40% of the gun transactions, to take care of this, let's say 10% of those people. We're still talking about millions of people a year that are now going to be classified as criminal.
Only if they break the law.
I can't imagine that it would be less than a felony to do so, because that's what it was for me if I failed to do this firearms deal. So it would have to hold somewhere near the same. So you're going to commit, so you would advocate the passage of a law that's unenforceable on its face, that is and creates.
I would disagree that it's unenforceable on its face.
But we are all right. When we already have laws and they're being broken,
Yeah.
we don't need more laws.
Well,
When we already no, but I mean, just if we've got laws
that's ever
that
been written has been broken.
if
So we
there
should
are
have no
already
laws,
laws that
that's
are
ridiculous.
being put out that are not addressing the problem and gun control does not work, why do we need more gun control?
I would challenge your premise.
Okay, but we demonstrated that gun control, even in its most draconian forms, does not reduce violence.
And we're not talking about those draconian forms,
When-
so I'm not sure what the issue is. We're talking about common sense measures, not draconian forms. We're not talking about
actually,
jackbooted thugs.
he's brought up something that I think is common sense that I hear you rejecting. Because something is not enforceable doesn't mean we shouldn't go on and
I
have
would
a law
challenge
about
that,
it.
that it's not enforceable.
The only thing I can say is that I don't want to live in a country where we are so hemmed in by laws, by a government that breaks the laws, as in Fast and Furious, by a government that abuses its citizens, that it's going to create a gun bureaucracy that's going to go to these gun shows and going to enforce every one of these myriad new laws that are going to be out there, when you're not going to change the single most important key element, and that is the person willing to commit homicide. The worst slaughter in this country was committed by a man in New York City with a gallon of gasoline who burned a nightclub with 80 people in it. It didn't need a gun. So what you're going to do is, in the attempt to restrict the lunatics who are not being kept off the streets, and you're going to attempt to restrict an object that is used lawfully to stop far more crimes than it used to commit crimes, that is enjoyed by millions of Americans.
See, that's
Excuse me,
exactly
sir.
what we're not doing.
Mr. Rouda.
You
Mr.
just again
Rouda.
set up a straw man.
Mr.
and then knock it
Rouda,
down.
I'm making-
I'm not proposing.
Mr.
Nobody's
Rouda.
proposing that we reduce gun ownership. Nobody.
Mr. Rouda. Yes, you are.
No, I'm
You're
not.
talking- you're
you set
talking
up that
about-
straw man. You say this is your position and this is why you're wrong, when that's not my position to start with.
I do hear you. What is the last thing you just said? That you're not reducing gun ownership.
We're not.
There
There's
are-
nothing in here.
There are guns today. I think I heard him say that he owns a gun that something in
There's
there
nothing
would
here-
restrict.
There's nothing in here that's stopping people from walking around the city streets with a gun.
But
Now,
with-
yes,
it-
But it will reduce the magazine
it does
capacity.
restrict which gun?
Walking around with
The
bazookas
point
today.
is that all you're doing is creating a greater snare of laws that will allow minor violations, perhaps, that will only impinge on the law-abiding, while the law-abiding are saying, why are we being made the criminals when you're not stopping the criminals and you're not stopping the violence?
I
We
disagree
know
with
what
the premise.
works. We know what works. Israel is what
So do it.
works.
So do it. Nobody's
Great.
stopping. Nobody. This is the straw man thing. I'm not saying not to do that. I'm saying do it. Do it with my
In
blessing.
Israel, young men and women
Let's
walk
go
around
do it.
with fully automatic M16s. Are you okay with that?
Have the government buy guns for people. I don't care.
Are you okay with
Put 'em out in
that?
the streets.
You're not being facetious. You're serious. You're okay with that?
If that's what you want to do, if you want to issue.
No, sir. You said you're okay with
If
that.
you
Is
want
that the
to issue them in
case?
fifth grade, then issue them in fifth grade.
Let's stay with respect
what
here.
I'm saying is that that's not the proposal that's on the table.
Okay, I don't see the judges back yet. Is that right? So we'll have one more audience comment. Okay.
They're having a debate in there.
Yes.
I'm
I bet a
confused about
difficult one.
some things, and hopefully you can clarify them for me. Both of you said, what did both of you say? Oh, that both of you agreed that what might be appropriate in rural Kentucky may not be appropriate in New York City. And of course, we all know that's a vast exaggeration, but what is appropriate in one place may not be appropriate. However, everything that's being proposed and the stack of papers that you have in front of you that you keep referring back to are all federal laws. How can you maintain both positions?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. And what I would say is that while there are differences between rural areas and urban areas, every single thing about them is not different. So there is a level, there is a layer of commonality that we all share as Americans, whether we live in a city or whether we live in the country. There are things that are alike, that are more alike about us than are different. And so that's what justifies federal law in the first place. We can have a federal law that is common to all people because not every single thing about us is different depending on where we live. However, the reason we have states and cities and those entities have the ability to make laws that are specific to their regions is because, in addition to what's common about us, there are also things that are different. And so we need to be able to, I used to work with somebody in the corporate world who would say, standardize with flexibility. So there are things that we can stand, if we do a solely one-size-fits-all approach, do only federal laws and don't allow local areas to tweak them, we're going to end up with a situation that doesn't work. If we only have local laws and we don't try to standardize anything, even though there's a lot of overlap, we're going to have an equally unworkable situation.
What local tweaks are in those laws?
Well, these are federal proposals.
But what local tweaks are available to those laws? What?
Well, no. What I'm saying is that...
What tweaks are in those proposals?
I'm not sure exactly what you're looking for. So
I'm asking what tweaks could be made on those proposals?
Well,
are there any provisions for tweaks on those?
These proposals would cover those things that we have in common, and they don't address those things that we have different.
So local laws
could pass a law on the local level that would be in addition to these and build on top
So the
of
answer is none on those proposals.
While true that you can't tweak a federal law, I'm just seeking truth over political positioning here. While true that you can't tweak a federal law, you can add other local laws that would do other things.
During the discussion, you said that...
Okay, sorry. Can we end there? Is that okay? Because we're ready to bring the judges in.
3 minutes.
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Let me make a couple of comments first. I very much appreciate the both gentlemen who said, this is frustrating to me. I want something different. And let me tell you, I want something different as well. Not from either of you necessarily, but from the entire political arena. And as I'm up here, I'm realizing just how difficult it is and just how different it is than business, even though I do believe that the same principles apply that we use in business. It's harder here because we are so trained. I would suggest to both gentlemen up here that we are so trained to go off tangents and not address the issue that I was asked. And I think that happened a lot tonight. I think it's normal. I think it's the way we live. I also think it's keeping us from getting to the root core of what we're trying to do. So as you go in your evenings to have your political discussions, be genuine. Listen to the other point. Don't just try to get my points across and win, but instead, like these gentlemen were trying to suggest, let's actually hear what you're saying and try to get to something deeper than where we have been getting to, including where we got to tonight. I think tonight where we got to was slightly better than where gun control debate would normally go, and only slightly. And I take as much blame for that as anyone because I didn't know how to get us down there. So let's keep trying. You all keep advising me how to do it better. and you all keep trying to really hear the other side's points because they both have valid points. Okay. Now we want to bring in the judges and see how we will allocate the funds and for some of the reasons why. Deanna, are you the spokesperson? Okay. I bet this is very difficult. You're doing this, right? Okay.
Okay. My fellow judges just said he just concluded everything that we saw. So I will be brief and precise and to the point. First of all, we'd like to say thank you to both of you. One of the things that the judges quickly recognized, as all of you do, is this is a very emotional topic. And this, because emotion is running strong on both sides, what we saw, we knew that both of you understood the issues well and the content well, but we occasionally saw, I'll borrow a term from emotional intelligence, is that we saw you get emotionally hijacked a couple of times, which means emotions overrode the logic in our thought process. We were real encouraged that on ground rule number 4, clarifying opinion from fact, that both of you did a lot better as you went through the day and the evening, and we thought that was very important. I think, my opinion is, those type of comments really helped us distinguish that. One of the things we saw, too, in ground rule number 2 is that both of you offered action steps and that you were not blaming most of the time. But some of the time, what we heard was some little sarcasm through in there, and we went, oh, there's the time that they got emotionally hijacked. And so we all had that happen to us every day. The other thing we thought was very good was that, Keith, you started with a question about the gun laws itself, and we saw, Charles, we saw you respond to that, and we thought that was really important. But at the same time, we thought that is ground rule 5, where we are seeking the truth, and we would like to have seen more of that and more focus on that about what the real issue is. But because of our emotions, sometimes we saw both of you go back to some of the emotional issues that you had. The showing respect, number 1, we saw that happen well between the two of you, between the audience. But one of the things we would have liked to have seen is what's real important in ground rule number 1 is where we forget, is what is the best solution for all. And sometimes we saw you kind of go into your corners, and we would have liked to have seen more work on that. More truth-seeking, good points that you had. And for example, here's an example of what you did really well, is that when you talked about the education on gun laws and gun safety, and you agreed on that, we would have liked to have seen you pursue that more in terms of where do we agree or where can we agree and find a solution that is best for all. And that's one of the things I wanted to underline. The judges thought that this was very thought-provoking, using the ground rules, and that it would have been different if we had not. And so we appreciated that. We also said that we saw both of you catch yourself and saying, oh, that's blaming. Wait, let me do that. Let me not do that. And so we think that as we move forward in these controversial, especially emotional issues, that it's important to keep that in mind. So the conclusion is, and this is from the audience and from the judges, that Keith, you followed the ground rules probably best in this debate. And Charles, we thought that you had we, audience and judges, the better content in the debate of this topic. However, what that means is the greater portion of the funds tonight will go to Keith's charity, which is CASA, and there are some funds that are also going to the other charity. And so we'll give you the details of that later when we know where the money is, right? Whatever. So thank you both, and it was a pleasure for us, the judges. Judges, would you like to add anything to that? Okay, and I did that with the help from my friends here, so thank you, Alan.
Okay, so finally we are at ground rule 7, hold yourself accountable to these ground rules. Hold yourself accountable to your own political debate. When you are at your dining room table, when you are talking to your neighbor who totally disagrees with you and is just stupid for believing the way they believe, check yourself. They are not stupid for believing what they believe. They have a different worldview, Find out what that is. Find out why they believe what they believe. Okay? Talk to them about it. Tell them your opinion in emotion-free ways. Understand each other better, and it will get us better solutions if we do that. We try to have this event every other month. So the next event I think would be March 26th, which would be the fourth Tuesday of every other month. We have no idea what our topic's going to be yet, so we're open for suggestions. Hopefully you all wrote some of those on your ballots. And we also do have a Facebook page. Go to facebook.com, search for Tackle with TAC 4, and you'll find us, like us there, and make comments about tonight. Tell us how to get better. Tell us what you enjoyed about tonight. Start some of these debates right there on the Facebook page. That'd be good too, okay? And invite your friends, tell people about us. We're trying to make this a big event, hopefully one that will also get us to better solutions. Okay, thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much.